So, welcome everyone. I'm showing that it is high noon here in Colorado. If you have just logged on, feel free to use the chat area in the lower left-hand corner to introduce yourself. Let me know who you are and where you're logging in from. We've got people from Arizona, North Carolina, and Boise and Kentucky, which is awesome. There is also a handout for today's session that you can download directly from Adobe Connect. Underneath everybody's names, it just says Sticky Situations Handout. I have made it a Word document. For those of you who like to take notes, you can take notes directly in the document. It is not a requirement at all for participating in today's session. It does have helpful resources in it, but it will also be available on the Libraries Learn website later this afternoon when I post the archive. So welcome to CSL in Session, Sticky Situations and Patron Privacy. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I am also going to be your presenter today. So we'll hope for no tech issues, right? Before we get started, I wanted to briefly introduce CSL in Session for those of you who may be unfamiliar with our monthly program. You might be used to webinars where you kind of kick back and you listen to somebody talk at you for an hour, and it's lunchtime here in Colorado, so some of you may have been hoping for that, but we're going to shake things up a little bit, and what I'm really hoping is that we can have a conversation about patron privacy and customer service and learn from each other, as well as the information that I'm going to share. And I have to keep up with my slides here. The main way that you will participate today is via the chat. It's in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Many of you have used it to introduce yourself. We've got people from all across the US, which is fabulous. Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, we've got Colorado represented. So if you have not yet introduced yourself, please feel free to do so. If by chance you have any tech issues, you can get a hold of me by in the upper left-hand corner, hovering over where it says Colorado State under hosts. You can send me a private message. Because I am the presenter also for today, I will try to help as possible. It's possible that I might also just I was going to say tell you verbally, but if you can't hear, that might not work. Anyway, we are also recording today's session. So if for some reason tech becomes an issue, the recording will be posted later today on the Libraries Learn website. And we also have live captions available for the session. You can turn the captions on using the CC button in the upper middle of your Adobe Connect screen, or you can view them in a separate window. I'm going to post that link into chat. So if you prefer to get captions in a separate window, I've just posted that chat as well. The captions also are archived in the recording. And if you are using the captions, you can turn them on, turn them off. You can change where they appear on the screen by moving it around. You can change the size, all of those things as needed. So I see people continuing to introduce themselves in the chat area, which is fabulous. We've got some more people logging in from Colorado, and we have a really great group today. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. One last time, if you would like to download the handout for today's session, it's right underneath all of the participants' names, Sticky Situations Handout, and it is a Word document in case you want to take notes. It is not a requirement for today's session. So today we are going to be discussing privacy and how it impacts customer service. So why a session on patron privacy and confidentiality? So all of us in this room, and we've got 35 people, which is amazing, and we're representing people from different libraries and different states, and we all bring a wide variety of education and experience. And at the same time, we are called to support a common set of professional values. And upholding patron privacy and protecting confidentiality is one of those professional values. So, once again, my hope is to have a discussion with you as we go through today's session. So, I welcome your ideas, your questions, your thoughts. I will have to say that as we go through today's session, we are going to be talking about ethics, laws, and policies related to our profession. So I do need to note that I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. So just keep that in mind. So to start off, what is privacy in regard to how we serve our patrons? Does anybody want to try to give a definition of privacy, or the way that you see it in relation to the work that you do? Feel free to use the chat area. Y'all didn't know there was going to be a quiz, right? So the way that I like to break it down after doing kind of digging in a little bit further is patron privacy is the right to seek information without judgment or consequences. And another key point is that the user is in charge of what personal information is shared. So on the slide here, we have it comes from the ALA Code of Ethics, Article 3, which states that we protect each library user's right to privacy and confidentiality with respect to information sought or received and resources consulted, borrowed, acquired, and transmitted. So, once again, this is a core value of our profession, but where does this come from? Where did we get maybe the idea for privacy in the library? And I'm going to pop the link to ALA Code of Ethics in chat as well. Yep, it talks about dealing with patron records. But is there anything else, like not maybe, sorry, my thoughts are jumbled, not necessarily in our professional documents, but is there some other place where this idea of protecting people's privacy comes from? See a couple people typing here. Yep, it talks about what they're borrowing. Yes, Debbie. Debbie wins a gold star, a virtual gold star. So, yes, it comes from the First Amendment, which protects the freedom of speech, thought, and inquiry. So, the First Amendment gives everyone residing in the United States the right to hear all sides of every issue and to make their own judgments about those issues without government interference or limitations. The First Amendment allows individuals to speak, publish, read, and view what they wish. So, thinking back to our professional documents, a library related documents, we have our code of ethics. Excuse me, can you think of any other documents that talks about privacy or might relate to the First Amendment? Yeah, there's a yes, Katie, the Library Bill of Rights. So da, 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 let's see here. So the ALA Bill of Rights says that all people, regardless of origin, age, background, or views, possess a right to privacy and confidentiality. Um, in their library use, and libraries should advocate for, educate about, and protect people's privacy, safeguarding all library use data, including personally identifiable information. And so Anna had also mentioned Colorado state laws, like the um, uh, Colorado privacy law, which we are going to touch on in just a moment, Anna. So you're queuing us up for moving ahead, which is awesome. So we've talked about privacy, but what is confidentiality? And can anybody tell me how it differs from privacy, especially in the work that we do? I see some people typing. Right, we're talking about information that might be shared among workers and not the public. That's part of it, definitely. Yes, confidentiality means that we don't share a person's information. But privacy, people could see them in a public building. So that brings up a really good point. Obviously, if a patron walks into a library, like they can be seen by anybody. We don't have cloaks of invisibility just yet. So that's a good point. Privacy is the patron's right to inquiry, and confidentiality is what we do with the information. Trudy now gets a gold star. So yeah, that's really the differentiation is patrons have an automatic right to privacy, especially with checking out materials and what programs they're attending. But confidentiality then is our responsibility as library workers to keep their personal information private. You guys are awesome. So have you all heard of the terms PI and PII? And would anybody like to define those? I see some more people typing. Right. So PI is so we've got PI, which is personal identifying information, and then there's personal identifiable information, which is PII. So PI is personal information. So it could be maybe a patron's first name, last name. Sometimes it can be used in combination with other personally identifiable information. So PII then is information that distinguishes one person from another. So once again, you all have, patron databases. Many people might have the same first name, the same last name, but then if you start talking about their address or their reading record or those kinds of things, that is personal identifiable information because we can narrow down as to who is doing what. So as an example, my last name has an unusual spelling, Kreger, instead of having an I in there. And there is another Christine Krieger. She's a doctor. I am not. Um, so my name is not necessarily personal identifiable information because there's another Christine Krieger that exists. However, if we looked at occupation or address or phone number, that can become personal identifiable information. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. So let's do a little bit of brainstorming here. What are some examples of information that we as library professionals need to keep confidential? And just pop those in chat. Age, checkout history, patron's address. Oh my gosh, coming fast and furious. Address and phone number, reading history, items borrowed. Yeah, even what location they're using, all account information, internet searching. Yep. Fee amounts and what they're for, right? Date of birth, holds requests, library card number, why they're using the library, titles on hold. Like there's a lot of information that we need to keep confidential. And it's more than just the patron's name and address and that kind of stuff. Computer use, program attendance, even their presence in the library. Once again, if another person sees them in the library, we can't do much about that. But if somebody visits the library, that is also private and confidential. Library card number, any financial information, hold slips. So the main reason for this is that personal identifiable information can actually be used to develop a picture of your tastes and interests. And I like to think about like social media when we're thinking about this. There's lots and lots of information that we share on social media every day without really thinking about it that can allow people to create a picture of us and sometimes be able to figure out specifically who we are. Like they could even like narrow down to our address and these kinds of things if we share enough information. So, show of hands, and you can raise your hand in the upper kind of middle of the screen. There's like a hand raise symbol there. Show of hands if you think your reading history, and many ILSs, hopefully it's an opt in. For reading histories in your ILS, but show of hands if you think that your reading history is a good representation of you as an individual. Somebody were to look at your reading history, would they get a good idea of who you are as a person? I'm seeing a couple. Okay. All right. You guys might be reading better books than I am. So I love to read murder mysteries and serial killer novels. So if all anybody had, or the only knowledge they had about me, is the books I read and my name, maybe even my address or something, I might end up in jail, right? Because it's not really an adequate representation of who I am as a person. So that's just kind of another example about why we need to keep any personal identifiable information private. All right, so earlier Anna had mentioned Colorado library law, and I know we have lots of people who are joining us from out of state. Many states have similar privacy laws in their state statutes and state law. So on the slide, and it is very hard to read, is a copy of the Colorado library law, section 119. If you downloaded the handout, and it's still available for download on the left-hand side, it is on page 3 and it's listed in the resources. And I think I saved the URL that I can grab. There we go. I'll pop this into chat as well. So people, ease of access. So Colorado library law says that a library may not disclose any record or other information that identifies a person as having requested or obtained specific materials or service, or as otherwise having used the library. So from those of you outside of Colorado, do you know if you also have state laws that regarding patron privacy, especially when it comes to libraries? And you can just let me know in the chat. So Georgia does. South Dakota does. So if you're not sure, that might be something to either check with your library when you go back, or do a quick search, because a lot of states do have privacy laws. And so once again, we're talking legal ramifications, not just professional ethics at this point in time. So for those of you from Colorado, according to Colorado library law, when can we share confidential information? And what might be some examples? And Laura did a quick, look at Laura being a librarian. She did a quick search result, and 48 states and the District of Columbia have laws protecting confidentiality of the library. And 2 states, Kentucky and Hawaii, have attorney general's opinions protecting library users' privacy. There you go. Thanks, Laura. That was awesome. And Jason is acknowledging when it's necessary to do our jobs properly. Let's see. What else do we have? Yep, for reasonable operation of the library. So to recover materials. So that's a great example. So if your library has fines or is sending overdue notices, that, we, especially through the mail, you mail them. So you're allowed to share some confidential information because we want to get those things back. And a couple of people are saying with a court-ordered warrant, which is also correct for Colorado. Couple more people typing. So once again, according to Colorado library law, different states may state differently, is when needed for reasonable operation of the library, which is fairly open if you think about it, but it's for things like overdue notices. I don't know how many libraries call their patrons when something is on hold, but we used to do that. Now we would let them know they had something on hold, but if we weren't talking to the person, we wouldn't say what that material was. When a person allows it through written consent, when required through a subpoena or court order, or when a custodial parent or guardian has access to a minor's record for the purpose of accessing the minor's records on the computer. And Paula had written, when a library board member calls and wants to know if her husband is still in the library, I thought she was testing me. Oh, yeah. So I refused to tell her, and she called back and apologized. Yeah. And April's mentioning sometimes patrons pick up holds for other people, but they're requiring them to have a card. So once again, we are allowing people to pick up holds. We're telling people when they have overdue notices and that kind of thing, but there are rules around that. And for those of you who are on, and I know over time, even in Colorado, this has changed. What are your policies regarding access to an information on a library card? In Colorado, my understanding is that patrons can, like a parent can access their child's record on their own on their computer, even if they walk in and they like, I want to know what's like checked out. Sometimes we can tell them because they actually physically have the card, but we can't just look them up. Do you guys have specific age ranges or other requirements if you're outside of Colorado? See a couple people typing here. Parents of a minor can access the information after showing ID, and that was Jay, and I can't remember where Jay is from. Patrons can add authorized users to their accounts here, and that gives certain types of access from Rebecca. Card needed or provide barcode. If not their card, they must verify a date of birth. The other parent can access if they're listed on the card. So we're going to talk about, and once again, this may vary from state to state, and it also may vary a little bit depending on library policies, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. Okay, so how do we ensure then that libraries and library staff uphold patron privacy and confidentiality? And how can we then connect Colorado library law or your state's library law and the code of ethics to the work that we do every day? And so this is more of a Colorado specific question, but how many of you, and you can say in chat or raise your hand, have heard of the Colorado Public Library Standards? And maybe in your library, so I see a couple people raising their hands. And once again, maybe other states also have standards. Okay, so I see a couple people have. So I'm going to briefly talk about specifically the Colorado Public Library Standards, specifically our governance standard. Once again, this may be something that you check with your library organization or kind of do a search to see if in your state you have something similar. So the Colorado governance standard outlines how libraries in Colorado are run, what the board does, what the director does, and once again, it's linked back to Colorado library law. So the governance standard, at least at this time, we are in the process of updating the public library standards here in Colorado. But right now, things like administering the library in accordance with state and local codes and ordinances and Colorado law is part of that. Colorado libraries must comply with federal and state laws that affect library operations, including the American Disabilities Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and the privacy law. And the privacy law refers to the Colorado privacy law. And the library director and staff apply practical and acceptable management practices and standards to the daily operations of the library. And these practices should be clearly defined in a set of policies adopted by the library governing authority and then made available to the public. So in Colorado, a standard is that the library is going to comply with state and federal laws, with Colorado privacy law, but also is going to set forth management practices and make those policies available to the public. We have a wide variety of different types of libraries in Colorado. When we're talking specifically public libraries, we have some city libraries, a lot of municipal libraries, ones that are run by the county. And so sometimes the board is involved in that, and sometimes it's not. And my guess is that is the same throughout the United States. But um, do you know if your organization has specific policies related to patron privacy, and are they accessible on your library organization's website? And you can let me know in chat. So Debbie's saying we have DoD library standards. So she works for an Air Force library. Excellent. People are saying yes, that they have policies. All right. So once again, most libraries will have a patron privacy policy or something similar. It may be called something different. And people are saying that yes, it's available, easy to get to from the homepage of the website. This is excellent. So keep sharing in chat. So on the screen is a not great screenshot from the Bemis Public Library. I did this training for them just over a year ago, and so their policy is available on their website. I've also included it in your resources if you want to take a closer look at it. But, oh, and I was going to, oh, I didn't pull it up. I was going to pop the URL in chat. My apologies. But anyway, it says their patron privacy policy says that the Bemis Public Library is committed to patron confidentiality. The confidentiality of library records is a core component of library ethics, and the Bemis Public Library follows the Code of Ethics of the American Library Association. And they link to that, which is great. So they're letting their patrons know where this comes from. It's a core, it's a core ethical value, and where does this come from? And then it goes on to say, under patron privacy and confidentiality, that the Bemis Public Library supports and upholds a library patron's right to privacy in accordance with Colorado state law. So they're letting them know that it is a state law. And the screenshot that I have doesn't have all of the information, but they go on to link then to Colorado library law. They have information about patron responsibility and privacy. They talk about confidentiality for children, third-party vendor service, data collection, data disposal, and government requests for library records. So once again, if you have downloaded the handout, or if you grab it later from Libraries Learn, take a look at the Bemis Public Library example, because it really is very thorough when talking about patron privacy. So we've looked at Bemis Public Library. What policies does your library have, and are they helpful in directing your actions with customer service? So once again, can you think of some procedures or guidelines that your library has to help you uphold privacy and confidentiality? So one of the things we talked about is how we notify people about holds and hold slips. How does your library, where do they put the holds, and how are they organized? Do they have people's names on them? And Laura was saying that they have a policy even about recording in a library. Debbie says that the ILS does not keep records of past checkouts. So Emma says that there are 2 pickup spots by name. And Jay says that he's in Atlanta. The hold slips have the first 4 letters of the last name and the last 4 digits of the card number. So it's kind of a code. And I think that that's what a lot of libraries, especially here in Colorado, they, maybe it's like a couple letters of the first name and a couple letters of the last name, because most of us have so many holds that we can't keep them behind the desk. I remember a time when we had all the holds behind the desk, but now there's too many. So once again, we're trying to protect patron privacy. by not putting the full name and the full library card number just for anybody to see, because somebody could see what somebody has on hold. Self-serve holds for 4 letters of last name and Colorado and library card. A lot of self pickups. Yep, Colorado Springs. Last name and first initial in Virginia. And Debbie's talking about how they're required to shred all paper produced in the workspace. Yes, especially library card applications. Probably a lot of people are applying online now, but if they're filling out paper, that needs to be shredded. And Debbie's holds are still behind the desk, and they shred the hold slips. So that's just one thing to think about. We've talked about mailing out information about fines and overdue books. And we've talked a little bit about kind of age restrictions for parents and how they might access information about their kids' cards. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So once again, I want you to keep your library's policies and procedures in mind as we dig a little bit deeper into how all this comes into play on a daily basis with the work that you guys do day in and day out. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, because it's been a long time since I've worked a public service desk, I worked for 21 years at a large library district here in Colorado, and I've been gone for 15. So I'll let you all do the math as to how old I am. Anyway, I was fairly new, probably within the first couple years that I worked there, I was working at night, and a detective came in and asked to see what a certain patron had checked out. The patron in question was under investigation for a crime. They didn't tell us what. And a book from the library where I worked was found in his possession. So in my case, I asked for ID and asked the detective if he had a search warrant. It made me very uncomfortable. I'll let you know. I was like, probably 22, 23 at the time. It was a little intimidating. I also called over our staff member in charge for the evening. So at the organization where I worked, when the branch manager wasn't available, like during the day, typically we had one person who was in charge for the evening. It turned out the detective did not have a warrant, so we referred him to the library branch manager and the library director and had them contact them moving forward. Show of hands, how many of you have been served or had a detective come in, and has anybody actually been served with a search warrant? Okay, so several people have at least spoken to a detective. And Leslie's saying that a detective here bullied our adult librarian and told her she didn't know the law. Well, at least in Colorado, you now have a copy of the law, right? Because a lot of times the detectives also don't know the law. I mean, Colorado privacy law is pretty specific, and they're trying to do a job, right? They're trying to solve crimes. So thank you for that. There wasn't a warrant, and we ended up referring him to the library director. Excellent. Would anybody have done anything different than what I did? No warrant. I think that's the key thing. Obviously, if he had a warrant, I still would have probably directed him to the library director. OSI asked us if we'd tell them if anyone checked out books on bomb making, which they don't have on the shelves. But yeah, that's not, once again, I remember the days of the Anarchist cookbook, and we used to hold it. We used to carry it, and it was checked out. That was confidential information. All right, so it looks like you guys probably would have dealt with this situation in much the same manner. So we've covered quite a bit of information so far. We have defined patron privacy and confidentiality. We've talked about Colorado library law. Many of you have looked up to see if you have a state statute or a law. We've talked about the library standards, at least here in Colorado, and that they require policies around privacy to be put in place. And we've talked a little bit about guidelines. So once again, guidelines would be sort of like when you're hired and you're trained about the policy, like what are you allowed to do and actually how you enact the policy or how you uphold the policy. But what this really all boils down to is customer service, and more specifically, consistent quality customer service. Consistent application of policies and procedures as we are trying to uphold patron privacy and confidentiality. Um, and what makes patron privacy sticky and what makes some of these situations sticky is that there's sometimes tension between these areas, right? We've got our values, we've got our ethics, we've got our laws, policies, and then there's customer service. So we may wish to provide the customer service that our public is asking for, but that might contradict our policies. We may want to uphold our professional values and ethics in Colorado library law, but we may have a law enforcement officer putting pressure on us to turn over patron records so that they can do their jobs, right? And they're kind of like pushing against each other. So it's these tensions that make it difficult sometimes in the moment for us to make the right decision. And that's one reason why it is so important for us always to provide service that is consistent with our professional ethics, library law, and the policies that we have in place. Once again, speaking specifically to your library's procedures and guidelines. And then I think it's also important to have conversation about any of these sticky issues when they happen, because sometimes our policies may need to be tweaked a little bit, not necessarily, to change it so that it doesn't uphold the Colorado library law or whatever your state's law is, but maybe there are small tweaks that have to be made in order to kind of release some of that tension. So once again, a raise of hands, how many of you in your organizations have seen inconsistent application of some of your policies or the like your privacy policy? Yeah, one person will look up somebody's record and somebody won't. And and that's confusing for the patron, right? They don't know all of the stuff about our professional values and our laws and all of these things, right? And that's not really their job. So this is why having policies and procedures that are consistently applied, and if there is tension, if there are things that we're questioning about them, because there's nothing wrong with questioning a policy or a procedure, have those conversations. Talk to your departments, talk to your manager, talk to your director, and have the conversations so that we can come up with policies and procedures that do uphold our values, ethics, and laws, but provide as much customer service as possible. And I'm just looking here at the chat. And Laura was saying, if there's where there's an active where in an sorry, tongue-tied. Where in an active investigation can we reveal some information? She said that she thinks she had an officer once and they were looking for someone on the run and wanted to know if they had been in the library. That's a really good question. And once again, I would look to your specific organization's policies. Because if it's not just that somebody checked out a book, but now we're talking about potential safety issues. And that one is sticky because, do we say that we think we've seen the person? In my case, we saw so many people in a day that I probably wouldn't be able to tell them. But does anybody else have a thought on that? If a law person comes in and if they don't have a warrant or a subpoena, would you tell them if somebody had been in the library? Great question, Laura. See a couple people. My library, so Hannah's saying that my library doesn't reveal if any certain person is in the library, but they do tell the officers that they're free to look around. That is probably a really good response, because once again, you can see people, but that puts the onus on the officer to take a look around. He also is welcome into the space. We can tell officers that they're welcome to look around. Okay, so that seems to be the consensus. Perfect. See a couple other people typing. All right, so it seems like the consensus is tell the officers that they're more than welcome to look around. But once again, if the person has already left, you know, one, they're not there any longer, and two, we don't want to violate privacy. Trudy says we also have parents calling, wanting to know if their children have been in the library, and they've gotten different responses. The argument is that children are minors gets made and she doesn't know if the person on the phone, but yeah, right. We don't know if the person on the phone is a parent, right? So we don't like to give that information. We're going to do a couple scenarios, so keep that in mind. Excellent. This is all great stuff. So, realistically, once again, we're talking about ways that we can provide consistent, excellent, and equitable service, right, to all of our patrons. Oh, and Jason makes a good point. Even if they are the parent, they might not be the custodial parent, right? There's a lot that can be going on when we're talking about these issues. Um, all right, so we're going to practice a little bit and we're going to work through some scenarios. We're going to do it as a large group, so you don't have to worry. I'm not going to break you into breakout groups. I always lose people when that happens. So we're going to chat about three different scenarios. And as we're thinking about these scenarios, I want you to consider um, the ALA Code of Ethics, Colorado library law, or your state law. Once again, I love hearing from people from other states. So you don't have to, if you're from out of state, you don't have to go and look up Colorado library law. Think also about your library policies, guidelines, and procedures. The scenarios are also listed in the playbook, and so you can revisit them later or potentially share them with colleagues and have some conversations back at your organization. All right. So, in scenario one, in between helping patrons on the floor, you overhear two staff members talking about a patron near the circulation desk. He's a bit creepy. I bet he lives alone. He's just so awkward. The other staff member responds by laughing. I know. I helped him check him out. I helped him check out some items last week, and he was checking out books on dating and how to find your soulmate. So, what makes this situation sticky? Is there tension anywhere? Judgment stating people patrons personal items or what they're having checked out, privacy issues, also not in the public area, right? They could be easily overheard. They're talking about, once again, what he's checking out. Yeah, other patrons could hear. It's not useful for operation, right? Excellent. Revealing a patron history. Yeah. Yep, you guys are on it. So, what would you do or what would you say if you happen to hear this conversation by colleagues? And pretend you're not a manager, just for the sake of fun. While you guys are typing, I always think about like if I as a public member overheard staff talking about another staff member or another patron, sorry, then I'd wonder like what would they be saying about me? So we have some answers coming in. Da, da, da. Ask them how they would feel if they were in the patron's shoes. Taking off the manager hat, yes. Um, Asking them to take it in the back and letting them know that if I can hear you, the patrons can too. Point out that they need to take the conversation elsewhere. And maybe try to compare it to another confidential situation. Like, how would you like it if oh, yeah, if you heard the nurse was laughing about your rash. Thank you, Anna. Um, yeah, these are all great. Because sometimes we do have to have conversations about patrons, right? We need to let people know what's going on, but we need to do that in a safe area, not in the public area. If you heard this next to the self checkout machines, would this change your response at all? Several people saying no. Probably for the same reason. Self checkout machines are in the public area. Yep. Yep. All right. So here's one more. What if a mom complained that her child saw this patron looking at pornography on the computer? Oh, Leslie said that they actually had a patron tell us that they weren't going to come back because they overheard employees talking about patrons. Yeah, like we could lose people over that. Thank you for sharing that, Leslie. Yeah, like, can we look at what's on the computer without being obtrusive? And Anna makes a good point. If it is not child pornography, then it is not illegal. It may be inappropriate. And if we happen to see somebody looking at that, we can tell them potentially, like, oh, you can't look at that here in the library. Once again, looking at our policies and our procedures, um, focus on the behavior, not the patron. And Leslie's saying that they do have a zero porn policy. So once again, her policy is a little bit different, and but once again, we wouldn't go into a lot of detail with the person who was reporting it, right? We wouldn't be telling the mom like, oh yeah, you know, this guy's a little weird and all of that stuff. We might say thank you and deal with it based upon our policy. Yep. Okay. And Paula says, when this happened at our library, our former director put notices on every computer station warning patrons about inappropriate material. And that's kind of a good point. If you have a policy that states that there's no pornography in the library, that should be posted somewhere so that our patrons can access those policies and understand what the behavior is. Excellent. So we're going to move on to scenario 2. A patron wants to know what is checked out on his wife's card so that he can return the items while she is out of town. Being so helpful, right? Where is it sticky and where is the tension? Yep, we've got Jay saying, nope, that they wouldn't give out that information. Patron record confidentiality. If he is able to look up her account on his own, then he can access that ID. And if that was the case, he probably could have done it from home too, right? So we could maybe show him how he could look up this at home, but we might not look it up for him. We want to provide good service by answering their question. Absolutely. But it is our responsibility to keep that information private. And right, are we going to like ask for ID? What if they're married, but they have different names? So, like, how would we know? So, yep. And it looks like in Jay's case, not only do they have to have the card number, they have to have the PIN number. And it makes a good point. He might not understand that his and his wife's cards are separate. So, without going into overly too much detail, you can provide some quick information. Oh, Colorado library law does not allow me to such and such. However, if you have her card handy, let me show you how you can look up your own record at home, whatever, so you can provide a little bit of education without going, in too much detail. And what if she doesn't want to return those items, right? Yeah. So in Trudy's system, they've opted to have their cards linked, and we would be okay to tell them that, and she doesn't know how she feels about that policy. Okay. He needs her permission. We don't know. Yep, the patron doesn't realize that it's our responsibility to protect. And Laura's saying that if there's late fees that we're discussing, that it's financial, and she might share that information, but not necessarily what the books are. Yep, we don't even know if they're still married, right? Like divorce, man, it can bring up a lot. I've been sent to pick up holds and I don't have any information all the time. And then we explain it to them, right? We have to do some explaining. So I think we'll skip this next little part because a lot of you have kind of told me what you might do or say. If you feel like adding, feel free to add that in the chat, but let's change it up a little bit. The next time the patron comes in, he's asking to see what his 16-year-old daughter has checked out. When you check the daughter's account, you see that she has checked out books on teenage pregnancy. So we're talking about a 16-year-old. Is that person treated as an adult? Do your policies have specific age ranges where you're allowed to do more or less depending on who the patron is? All right. And Jay, I think I'm remembering he's from Georgia. According to the policy, the patron has access until age 18. And I swear in Colorado, once again, I worked the library desk for a lot of times. I feel like at least our policies and the organization that I work with, it moved from 16 to 18 a couple times, like during the length of my tenure there. Rebecca has a teen card policy where teens can get cards separated from their parents, youth cards the parents have access. Yeah, in Colorado, it's a whole new thing when patrons are that age due to emancipation laws. Good point, Katie. 16 is too old for parents to have access in our system. And Laura's saying she's not even accessing the account because the policy would not allow that unless he has the card with him. And once again, if he has the card with him, he can look this up at home. He might not know that. He might not know that there is online access. But yep. Still falls under the confidentiality policy, especially without a card or card number. We say that something is checked out, but not what the title is. In Paula's case, the parent has access until 18. Trudy's case, she would still be a juvenile here. Idaho lawmakers are, yes, going down the rabbit hole against libraries supplying inappropriate materials. Yes, that is a whole other ball of wax and a whole other presentation, right? But so we can see, depending on what state you're from, depending on what organization you're from, there are different policies. All right, one more scenario. We have time for, whoops. Oh, I forgot. Here's one more. One of the books on the child's record is about dealing with a parent who is an alcoholic. So for those of you who say that they have access until they're 18, does this by chance change your stance at all? Or can it? See, these situations are sticky. Follow the policy. Yep. It doesn't matter what the books are about. Privacy is privacy. Yep, have to follow the privacy, right? Yeah. And so once again, this is where that tension comes into play, right? We, in our heart, feel like we want to do the right thing. We want to do good customer service. We want to protect people, and we have to follow the laws. So in this instance, maybe if this happened in your library, you follow the policy because that is the policy, but then maybe you bring it to your director, your manager, or whatever, and be like, hey, you know what? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the tension between this. Yeah, and Laura's talking about that's why she's proud to be from Colorado and how we do provide a lot of protections for teens. Excellent. All right, last scenario. And this came up a little bit earlier. A frantic mom calls looking for her 11-year-old son who did not show up after school. He loves the library and he's wondering if you can page him or look for him. Where's the tension? What makes this sticky? Like, how many of you are parents? And if you don't know where your kids are, it's scary, right? So Paul is saying, if he's here, I'll let him know you need to talk to him. So you're not saying whether he's there or not. If you happen to see him, you can tell him to call home. Yep. And Anna said the same thing. If someone calls for anyone, I don't page, but I will, oops, comments are coming in fast and furious, going off my screen. If someone calls for anyone, I don't page, but I'll look for the person based on the description. If found, I'll say that someone is asking for them. We do page. So Rebecca's saying we page for situations like this, but then if the person answers the page, we just let them know that the parent called. So kind of like a unique, thing. They're not just bringing the kid to the phone. They'll page so the person might hear it, and then they'll tell them to call home. So it looks like a lot of agreement on this. Yeah, Laura's saying if it's sticky because he loves the library, we probably know who she is talking about, but we have to follow the policy. Good customer service is telling the parent what she can do. So once again, yes, she could come and look. Yep, I'm not able to help the mom on the phone. Some libraries don't even have a paging system. And Hannah says 11 years old is old enough to be in the library by themselves. Tell the parent that they're free to look. Yeah. Yeah, what if the person doesn't want to be found? You have to consider that, even at 11 years old. Like, we don't know. So let's bring up, because I have to make it more sticky. Oh, We talked about what you could say. So the son is a regular at the library, and he recently confided to you that there's been trouble at home. Does this change your response at all? Yeah, and Leslie's saying it's tough because of his age, right? Which is why I picked 11. They're still kids, quite an adult yet, not a young kid. We don't page or put out whiteboards anymore. Mom can look around or send someone to look. Response stays the same. Not to the parent, but you would try to provide resources for the kid when he told me that. Yeah, so he's confiding in you. So he's telling you, and you then might be able to lead him to some other resources that might be able to help. Yeah. So let's just make it a little bit more sticky. The kid is usually in the library and you haven't seen the son in over a week, which is unusual. Does this change your response? And Hannah's saying, same response. We could tell the child about safe place or something like that, which they offer. Laura's saying it can't change the response. Right. And this is hard, right? Because once again, many of you may be parents, you may have kids, and when a frantic mom calls and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen this kid in a while, like it gets really sticky. It pulls on our emotions and we want to be able to help. Um, yeah, as an employee, Katie, your hands are tired and it hurts your heart. Exactly. Yep. Yep. So we've gone through these scenarios and like there's a lot to talk about, right? So hopefully you can see that many of the situations that you guys deal with on a daily basis, and once again, I know sometimes people think, oh, customer service in libraries, it's easy, right? We know it's not. Um, but there are a lot of situations that can come up around patron privacy that are very sticky. There's nuances and circumstances and ethical dilemmas that come into play. But hopefully, if we can use the common values that frame our profession as inspiration to provide exceptional, consistent, and equitable service to our patrons, and remember that our library policies are there to direct that service, hopefully, a lot of the guesswork can be eliminated. So, my challenge to you is to continue building on what we started here today. Take the scenarios back to your organization and have further conversations, or see if you can develop actual scripts that staff can use. ALA also has created free downloadable privacy field guides, which go a lot deeper into privacy as a whole. There are 7 different guides. They're free to download, and they talk about things, situations having to do with staff, patrons, groups, even vendors. They're listed in your handout, and I meant to pull out that URL to pop in chat, and I apologize. Maybe I can do that real quick. But once again, continue these conversations because it's helpful if everybody knows. Like sometimes, you were first hired, especially somebody hands you a policy and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. But then when the actual situation happens, that's where it gets a little bit sticky. And it can, the more we can have conversations about the why we do things, especially because at least here in the state of Colorado, and I would guess in many of your organizations as well, we also have a lot of people who work in libraries who don't have the library degree, which is cool and fine because we provide a lot of the training they need. But what they might be missing is some of the background about the why we do things. Do they even know we have an ALA code of ethics? Do they know that we have some of these other resources? Do they know that where the policies are located? So once again, it's making sure that everybody has the information that they need to provide that quality and consistent service. I just found the ALA field guide, so I popped that into chat. So once again, as we wrap up today's conversation, thank you for joining and being as participatory as you were. This has been a really a fun and hopefully enlightening session to do, and I appreciate everybody's kind of chiming in, especially people from out of state. That's been very helpful. We do have a survey that we would love to have you fill out about today's session. You can either click on the link right on the screen, or I'm going to pop that into chat. Far too many windows open on my screen here. because we would love to know what you thought. It is an anonymous survey, and you can let me know what worked and what didn't. And if you need a certificate, especially for people from out of state, I'm going to put my email address into chat. And bear with me. You can click right on that link and I can provide you a certificate as needed for attending today's session. It's not a CPU certificate. It's sort of like you were here and it lasted an hour certificate, but hopefully that will be enough. And then our next our next CSLN session is going to be on Thursday, February 8th, this time at 11 a.m. They're normally at noon Colorado time, but we're going to shift to 11 a.m. on Thursday, February 8th, when Sharon Morris and Karen Hickson are going to talk about library trends. As I mentioned, we did record today's session, and the handouts and the slides and the scenarios and all of the things. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once here. Um, are going to be posted later this afternoon as soon as I can get everything edited. So you can visit Libraries Learn CSL in session. I just popped that link in. So we hope you can join us for our next CSL in session, but do access the archive and the resources when I get them posted. And so with that, I will wish everybody a really great afternoon, and let's go forth and do some awesome customer service.